Don't touch that. This seat's taken. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It sliced through the first-class cabin like a paper cut, small, sudden, and sharp enough to sting. Marcus Carter stopped mid-step, his boarding pass still in hand. The woman had stretched a beige wool blanket across the empty seat beside her and placed a leather tote squarely in the center. Her eyes, cold and unblinking, locked onto his. He hadn't even sat down yet. The flight attendant looked up from her tablet, caught the tension in the air but said nothing. The silence spoke first. This was seat to A's seat. Confirm, scan, printed in black ink. And now, draped in entitlement. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. He didn't argue. He didn't roll his eyes or sigh or push past. He just stood there, black t-shirt, dark jeans, carry-on slung low. A quiet storm. Karen, for lack of a better name, turned back to her phone like she hadn't just claimed federal airspace with a throw blanket. She didn't say another word. She didn't have to. Across the aisle, an older gentleman glanced up from his newspaper. His brow twitching with curiosity. Row 3 held its breath. The tension wasn't theatrical, it was administrative. It felt like policy being enforced without ever being stated. The attendant finally spoke. "Sir," she said, not unkindly, but with practiced distance. "We can help you find another seat if there's been a mix-up." Marcus turned to her slowly. "There hasn't." He offered the boarding pass to A, first class. Confirmed. She didn't even look at the ticket. Her eyes followed his shirt, instead plain, fitted, logo-free. Then to his shoes, clean, but quiet, not the kind of shoes this cabin was used to. "I believe the lady settled in," she said gently. Karen's tote didn't move. The blanket stayed put like a flag. Marcus blinked once, no anger, no protest, just recognition. This wasn't new. Not to him. 20 years ago, he'd walked into a Sky Lounge in Dallas. He was 25, fresh out of grad school, flying standby on a client's dime. The man at the front desk didn't even check his name before pointing to the general boarding area. "Business class is for actual members, son." He'd slept in a plastic chair next to the vending machines that night, then gone home and wrote the first pitch deck that would start his empire. Now, to decades and several $billion later, a blanket tried to erase him again. He reached into his coat, pulled out his phone, and tapped once. No anger, no noise. Just a message. "Rachel, it's happening." On the other end, Rachel Harris didn't hesitate. Already tracking. "Let me know when to go live." He put the phone away and said nothing, because sometimes power doesn't arrive screaming. It boards quietly and waits for someone to mistake it for nothing. Marcus Carter didn't shift, didn't clear his throat, didn't even twitch a finger toward the blanket. He just looked at the seat like it was already his because it was. Seat to A, paid, reserved, no upgrades, no favors, just facts. But facts, in this cabin, often came second to fabrics. And Marcus, he wasn't dressed for worship. A plain black t-shirt, fitted, no logo, jeans dark wash, cuffed just above the ankle. Black sneakers, clean but worn at the soles, no Rolex, no cufflinks, no monogrammed duffel. To the untrained eye, he looked like someone who'd missed his gait. To trained bias, he looked like someone who didn't belong. And that's exactly why he came like this. This wasn't a last-minute booking. This wasn't even just a flight. It was a field test. For the past 6 months, Marcus had been tracking complaints buried in HR threads, whispered in exit interviews, hidden beneath 5-star peer statements, all pointing to the same quiet ride, selective service, based not on money, but mood, based not on status, but signals. He didn't trust third-party audits anymore. He trusted data, and data lives in real-time behavior. So he boarded this flight alone, no assistant, no publicist, no digital badge of status, just himself. He hadn't even told the board, Not yet. Across the cabin, a flight attendant reset the coffee cart. The scent of hazelnut and processed calm drifted in. Someone adjusted their eye mask. Another tapped on a MacBook. The cabin was polished, plush, and polite, but something just beneath it buzzed. Karen hadn't removed the blanket. She hadn't acknowledged him again. She scrolled through Instagram like she hadn't just drawn a boundary with a piece of fabric. Marcus lowered his gaze, not in defeat, in calculation. The first time he flew first class was at 32 after closing a Series B round. That's on Silicon Valley. He wore a suit that day. The gate agent called him Mr. Carter with a question mark at the end. He remembered how his heart raced as he walked to his seat, not from excitement, from fear that someone would stop him. Now he owned a private jets, 5 patents, and 22% of an airline. And still a blanket dared to claim space before he could sit. The intercom buzzed. "This is your captain speaking. We'll begin final boarding in 5 minutes. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for departure." 5 minutes. He glanced once at his phone. Rachel, protocol loaded, standing by. He didn't respond, not yet. He wanted to give the system one last chance to self-correct. The attendant from earlier approached again. She didn't look apologetic. She looked hesitant, like she Googled him on the crew tablet and wasn't sure whether to trust the result. "Sir, if you'll follow me, we may have a more suitable seat further back." He blinked. More suitable. She hesitated. "It's also a window seat." Karen smirked without looking up. Marcus tucked his phone away. Then, with a voice so calm it chilled the air around them, he said, "You're about to find out how unsuitable that suggestion really is." The attendant stiffened. "Excuse me?" But Marcus didn't repeat himself. He simply turned, looked down at the tote bag and the blanket, and then very carefully took the seat. Karen gasped. "What do you think you're doing?" The cabin heard it. Row 3 turned again. Row 4 stopped tapping. The silence wasn't confused. It was bracing. Marcus fastened his seatbelt, clicked, then leaned back, not arrogant, not smug, just anchored. And in that moment, something began to shift. Not in the plane, in the power. The seatbelt clicked, but the room didn't. Something about the sound, small, final, undeniable, unsettled the air. Karen sat bolt upright. She pulled her blanket tighter, like armor. "You need to move," she snapped, her voice rising an octave to high for civility. "You're making me uncomfortable." Marcus didn't even glance her way. His eyes were focused straight ahead, still, measured, present. That's when Brian appeared. Mid-30s, tall, blonde, and armed with a name tag and misplaced confidence. Senior flight attendant, judging by his stride and how quickly he took control of the aisle. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking directly at Marcus. Karen jumped in, overeager. "He sat here uninvited. That's my seat." Marcus didn't blink. "This is C2A. Brian raised a brow. "And you have a boarding pass?" Marcus handed it over, smooth, silent. Brian didn't look right away. He glanced at Karen first, as if searching her face for confirmation that this was indeed a disruption. Then finally, he turned to the ticket. His jaw tightened. Karen leaned in. "There must be a mistake. I told you I needed this row empty. Medical reasons." "Medical reasons," Marcus said, still not looking at her. "You mean preference." Brian cleared his throat. "Sir, we're trying to keep things calm. If you'd be willing to switch to another first-class seat." "No." It wasn't loud, but it stopped everything. "No," Brian echoed, eyes narrowing. Marcus turned to face him now, fully, calm as ever. "I'm not moving. This is my seat, and your crew's reaction is being observed." Brian hesitated. "By whom?" Marcus didn't answer, because sometimes the most dangerous thing a system can face is a black man who says nothing and still doesn't move. From row 4, a woman in a gray blazer started recording on her phone, quiet and steady, next to her. A teenager whispered, "I think I've seen him before." Karen stood. "This is harassment. You're making me feel unsafe." A second attendant, younger, clearly nervous, appeared behind Bryant. She looked between them. uncertain where to land. Marcus remained seated. His hands rested gently on the armrests, fingers relaxed. His presence didn't grow. The panic did. Brian pulled a small device from his pocket crew manifest. He typed something quickly, then frowned. He looked again at the name on the boarding pass, and then again at Marcus. I'm going to have to ask you to wait in the galley until we sort this out. That won't be happening, Marcus replied, his voice dipped in steel. Karen crossed her arms, triumphant. Good. He shouldn't be here anyway. The woman in row 4 finally spoke up. He's not doing anything wrong. He's sitting in his seat. Brian turned to her, annoyed. Ma'am, please stay out of it. Karen smiled. Finally, someone with sense. But the younger attendant stepped forward, voice quiet but clear. I scanned his ticket myself. It came up green. Brian's neck turned slightly red. That can't be right. She nodded. It was. I remember the name. Marcus Carter. A beat, then another. Brian's expression shifted from dismissive to curious to something bordering on fear. Karen's smile faltered. Wait, what did she say? The woman in row 4 stopped recording and whispered, That's Marcus Carter, the Carter Fund. The teenager muttered, the guy who helped bail out Delta. Brian took a step back. Sir, if we've made an error. You didn't make a mistake, Marcus interrupted. You made a judgment. Karen was already grabbing her tote. No. This is ridiculous. He's playing some kind of game. Marcus turned his eyes to her. Finally, no. This is a lesson, and unfortunately, you volunteered for the demonstration. Across the aisle, 2 more phones were lifted, quietly, without permission. The room wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. Brian straightened his tie, suddenly looking very small. Sir, we can. No. One word, final. Then came the sound no one expected. Ding. A message. From Rachel. Live protocol initiated. Cabin footage sensing. Marcus didn't smile. He just leaned back. Because sometimes, you don't raise your voice. You raise the stakes. Marcus Carter sat still. Not like someone waiting. Like someone watching the world shift around him and letting it. Karen was pacing now. Her blanket crumpled on the floor. Her tote half-zipped. Her voice rising with every word she flung toward the cabin crew. This is insane. He's intimidating me. I want him off this plane. The passengers weren't buying it. Not anymore. The calm in Marcus's body was louder than her voice. He hadn't moved. Hadn't argued. Hadn't shouted. That's what made it worse. He just sat there. Belt fastened. Back straight. Eyes steady. And somehow it scared them more than if he'd yelled. Brian stood nearby, clutching the manifest like a shield. His fingers tapped anxiously against the hard plastic. He looked toward the galley, expecting backup, instruction, and escape. But there wasn't any. Sir, he tried again, his voice softer now. If you just give us a moment to verify everything. Marcus didn't even blink. You had that moment. You wasted it. His voice didn't cut. It settled, like gravity. The younger attendant, Mia, her name tag said hover behind Brian. She wasn't speaking anymore. But her eyes had changed. They didn't dart nervously. They watched Marcus like someone remembering instructions from a training that never mentioned this kind of man, quiet, immovable, powerful. Across the aisle, a businessman leaned into the woman beside him. He's the one who bought out the green energy startup last month, right? She nodded, and half of Jetstream Capital. My brother works in finance. They call him the Quiet Ledger. Karen's voice broke through again, desperate now. Why are you all just sitting there? Do your jobs. But no one moved. A pause swept through the cabin, not silence, but hesitation. The kind that happens when control is slipping and everyone knows it, but pretends they don't. Then came the whisper, sharp and soft, from a teenage girl in row 5. Why is the only calm person in this room the one being asked to leave? Her mother squeezed her hand. No one answered. Marcus turned his head, just slightly. His voice reached the aisle without effort. You keep asking me to move, but I'm already exactly where I paid to be, where I'm entitled to be. He leaned forward, slow, intentional. What you really want is for me to shrink so you can stay comfortable. The words didn't echo. They landed. Karen sat down hard, her expression shifting not in guilt, but confusion. The story she'd written in her head where she was the victim was no longer being cast. Mia stepped forward. She spoke gently. "Mr. Carter," she said, finally using his name, "do you want a glass of water?" He looked at her, and for the first time since boarding, his face softened just slightly. "Yes, thank you." Brian stiffened. "Mia." But she was already walking to the galley. Across the rows, phones were still up, still recording. But no one spoke, because something was happening, something rare. Justice wasn't being shouted. It was being revealed. One man, one seat, no need to yell. Just the kind of dignity that draws truth out of shadows and forces people to look. The lens was already rolling before anyone gave it permission. Row 4, seat C. Emma Larson, 38, policy researcher, Minnesota native. Mother of to had her phone resting on the armrest, angled just right. She wasn't aiming for drama. She was aiming for documentation. Next to her, Michael Grant, 42, consultant from Tampa, longtime flyer, whispered, "This is bigger than a seat mix-up." Emma nodded. "This is protocol. Weaponized." Row 5, the teenage girl and her mother weren't filming, but they were listening, watching, feeling the air thicken with something unspoken. And then came the whisper, the one that turned observation into confirmation. "That's Marcus Carter, the guy who grounded a charter line in 2023 for discriminatory staff conduct. Quiet billionaire, board-level owner." It came from row 6, passenger unknown, but the name traveled like wind between seats. Karen heard it. Her eyes narrowed. Marcus didn't react. Not to the whisper, not to the cameras. He'd lived through enough of these scenes to know, the moment you start performing, you lose your edge. He sipped the water Mia brought him, calm, poised, not above it, through it. Brian was still standing, still holding the manifest like a fading badge of authority. His shoulders looked heavier now, as if the weight of every decision made in bias was catching up to him. Then came the shift. Not from crew, from cabin. Passenger after passenger began leaning, whispering, muttering not against Marcus, but in disbelief at what they had witnessed. Row 3, a silver-haired man muttered, "I've flown 300,000 miles. Never seen a white man question like that over a seat." A woman in row 2, outside, spoke up louder. He gave his ticket. He sat down. The woman escalated, not him. Karen turned sharply. "Excuse me, are you accusing me of lying?" The woman didn't flinch. "I'm saying we all saw what happened. We're not blind. You put a blanket there and claimed territory that wasn't yours." Karen scoffed, but her voice cracked. "I was protecting my space." Marcus finally spoke again, his tone surgical. "You weren't protecting your space. You were protecting an illusion that certain people don't sit in seats like this." Phones lifted higher. Karen stood, sputtering. "He's turning this into a racial thing." Michael and Rofer shook his head. "No, you already did that. The moment you acted like a blanket was more credible than a boarding pass." Brian looked at the cockpit. His radio buzzed low. Static, inconclusive. He didn't move. Then came the final spark. From the very back, a voice, young, unsure, but full of something dangerous, the truth. "I'm Mia Lang, trainee crew. I scanned his ticket myself. It was green, clean, no flags." The system auto-verified his ID. All heads turned. Karen hissed, "You shouldn't be speaking during conflict." Mia didn't step back. "I wasn't going to. But watching this unfold and saying nothing would have made me part of it." Marcus looked at her, nodded once, subtle, enough. Emma whispered to Michael, "This just shifted from drama to evidence." And that was when the cabin stopped pretending it wasn't involved. What started as a woman claiming a seat became a room confronting a pattern. Phones weren't just recording anymore. They were witnessing. The air wasn't just tense now. It was charged. Mia Lang stood frozen in the aisle, a single thread of truth exposed for the whole cabin to see. Her trainee badge suddenly felt like both armor and target. Brian turned toward her slowly. "You're out of line, Mia." She didn't flinch. "I did my job. I scanned his pass. It matched. Everything cleared." Karen's face twisted. "She's lying. She's just trying to impress him, probably hopes he'll tip her or something." A few passengers gasped. One older man in row 6 muttered, "That's enough." Brian's voice rose, louder now, urgent. "Everyone stay seated. This is a sensitive situation. We're handling it." Michael from row 4 didn't even blink. "No, you're spinning it." Emma lifted her phone again. "Say that again." "Sensitive situation for a confirmed passenger sitting in his assigned seat." The intercom beeped, then silence. Brian's hand hovered over his radio. He looked back toward the cockpit, waiting, hoping for a voice of authority to save him. Nothing came, so he tried to reclaim the room. "Mr. Carter," he said, suddenly formal, "we're escalating this matter to security. Until they arrive, I must ask you to remain compliant and refrain from further disturbance." Marcus sat still. "What disturbance?" Karen interjected, shrill. This. All of this, none of it would have happened if he just took another seat. He's being difficult on purpose." Marcus turned to face her, finally. Voice calm, tone razor sharp. "No, I'm being present on purpose. And presence, when it's unexpected, always feels like disruption to those who assume ownership of the space." That landed harder than any yell could. Karen blinked. "You think you're clever?" "I think you're uncomfortable," he replied, and mistaking that for injustice. A murmur rolled through the cabin, the kind that says, "He's not wrong." Row 3. A woman whispered, "I've never seen anyone hold the room like that." Mia's voice cracked slightly, but she stood firm. His ID matched the name. The name matches the manifest. He didn't force anything. He claimed what was his. Brian snapped, "Mia, you're jeopardizing your training." "Then maybe your protocol's the problem," she shot back. Karen turned to Brian. "This is spiraling. Do something." And that's when the captain stepped out. Tall, crisp uniform, gold trim. Daniel Pierce, mid-40s, veteran pilot. He surveyed the room not as someone curious, but as someone annoyed that his attention was required. "What's going on here?" Brian spoke first. Passenger in 2A refused a seat reassignment. Verbal escalation. Trainee involvement. Daniel turned to Marcus. "Sir, we have other passengers waiting for this flight to depart. If there's been confusion, we can rebook you." Marcus held his gaze. "There's no confusion, only assumption." Daniel's tone stiffened. "If you continue to obstruct crew instructions." Emma cut in, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Obstruction or objection to being profiled?" Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Mom, stay out of crew matters." Michael added, "When crew matters become public misconduct, passengers have every right to speak." Karen barked, "This is ridiculous. You're all defending a stranger overtrained airline staff." Marcus turned to Daniel now, full attention. "You want the room quiet. Fix the lie, not the person they tried to erase with it." Daniel hesitated. Just a beat, long enough to crack his image. Then he reached for his radio. "Security to gate B14. We've got a non-compliant passenger." Phones lit up. Mia flinched. Karen exhaled, satisfied. Brian folded his arms. And Marcus? He stayed seated, still, because he'd seen this before, not just in airports, but in boardrooms, banks, briefings, where rules shifted to protect fragility, where calm was twisted into threat. He wasn't surprised. He was ready. The silence after the security call wasn't relief. It was recoil. Passengers didn't settle. They leaned forward. Phones didn't lower. They steadied. Everyone knew something irreversible had just begun. Marcus Carter didn't move. His seatbelt still fastened, posture calm, legs still. But his eyes, they shifted, just slightly, from observation to confirmation. Daniel Pierce turned away from the radio with forced authority. "Sir, I need your ID and personal belongings. You're being temporarily removed for security verification." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Security verification for sitting. Brian added, almost proudly. Passengers with disruptive behavior must comply with crew-led protocol. Mia stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. He hasn't disrupted anyone. Karen scoffed. Oh, come on. This is what always happens. You let them play victim, and suddenly we're the problem. Rofer went still. Emma's voice cut through, cold and clear. No. The problem is when your discomfort rewrites the rules. Daniel walked toward Marcus, his hand hovering by the seat. You can comply peacefully or be escorted. Then he made the mistake. He reached, without permission, without warrant, without cause, and pulled Marcus's carry-on from under the seat. The cabin gasped. Michael and Rofer shouted, you can't do that. Emma raised her phone higher. That's a legal search. He hasn't consented. Marcus remained seated, eyes locked on Daniel, voice like ice over stone. Is this standard procedure now? Remove the black man's bag before you verify the truth. Daniel paused, realizing too late the optics, the silence, the cameras. Karen tried to spin it. They're just making sure he's not a threat. Marcus turned to her, slow and precise. You think calm is a threat. You think silence is a weapon. But what scares you isn't my tone, it's my presence, and a space you thought you owned. The cabin was no longer passive. They were leaning in. They were witnessing. Mia spoke again, louder this time. Captain. His skin was green. Verified. I saw it. Brian barked, that's enough. Mia. No. She snapped back. It's not. This is wrong, and you know it. Daniel set the carry-on the seat beside Marcus. Open it, he ordered. Marcus stared at him. Didn't touch it. You want my bag, he said, quietly. You open it, you search it, on camera, in front of these witnesses, and then explain to corporate why you thought Fabric was more credible than a manifest. Daniel's face twitched. Corporate? Emma's voice rang out again. He's not just a passenger. You really don't know who you're trying to drag out, do you? Karen looked from face to face. He's bluffing. These people fall back on lawsuits and sob stories. It's a hustle. Marcus turned slowly. One hand reached for his phone. He tapped once. No sound, no drama, just a voice. Rachel, face activated. A brief pause. Then her response, calm and surgical. Copy. Compliance log sensed. Cabin incident flagged. Crew and passenger statements timestamp. CEO override pending. Karen blinked. Wait, CEO? Marcus looked up. You wanted a show, he said. Now you're in it. Daniel stepped back, eyes darting. Who are you? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to, because at that moment, the door at the front of the cabin clicked open. Two uniformed airport security officers stepped inside, and behind them, a man in a suit, navy, sharp, clipped ID lanyard swaying gently as he walked. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He looked at Daniel, then Brian, then Karen, and then he said for words, he's not the problem. The man in the navy suit stepped fully into the cabin. Confident, crisp, controlled. The kind of presence that doesn't ask for attention. It claims it by simply being there. Brian straightened like a boy caught in a lie. Daniel stepped aside without knowing why. Karen shrank half an inch in her seat. The man's ID badge glinted briefly under the cabin lights. Chief Operations Liaison Atlantic Air. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Mr. Carter, he said, nodding respectfully. We've been informed. I'm here to ensure this matter is handled appropriately. Karen scoffed, desperate now. This is a setup. This is absurd. Who even is he? The man turned slowly. He's a principal stakeholder, he said, flat, and until last quarter. He held to voting seats on the board. Silence, not just from Karen, from everyone, because silence, in the right context, is louder than protest. Marcus finally stood, smooth, deliberate. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, looked to the security officers, and said, "Will this be necessary?" They both shook their heads. The man in the navy suit continued, addressing the cabin now. This aircraft will remain grounded until a full incident review is logged. I've instructed legal to begin reviewing footage, including any crew protocol breaches. Karen shot up. You're punishing the staff because he made noise? Marcus turned to her. Calm? Unbothered. Surgical. I didn't make noise. I made space. He gestured to the rows of passengers still silent, recording. And now everyone sees what happens when presence walks into the wrong narrative. Brian opened his mouth, but the man raised a hand. Flight lead, he said, report to the jetway for debrief. You are relieved of service pending investigation. Daniel froze. You're pulling me? The man looked directly at him. You laid hands on a passenger, without cause, without consent, and you ordered an illegal bag search while being filmed by 9 different devices. Daniel's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Mia, still near the galley, whispered, that's accountability. Karen clutched her tote like a life raft. You can't let him humiliate people like this. What gives him the right? Marcus turned slowly. What gives me the right? His voice was low, dead steady. The fact that I didn't take it, I earned it. He took a step forward. I earned the right by staying calm while being accused, by staying seated while being erased, by building what people like you assumed I'd never touch, let alone own. The cabin didn't breathe. He kept going. I don't owe you comfort. I don't owe you silence. I don't owe you anything, except maybe this lesson. Then he turned to the man in the Navy suit. I'd like to speak with the acting regional VP within the hour. The man nodded. Already scheduled. Conference line open. Marcus looked at Brian, then at Daniel, then finally at Karen. She looked smaller now, not because he shouted, but because he never had to. Then, without fanfare, he returned the seat to A, sat down, refastened the belt, and looked straight ahead. The man in the suit gave the order. This flight is grounded. New crew will be dispatched. Refunds and reroutes will be processed. Passengers didn't groan. They applauded. The applause fed not in energy, but in volume. It lingered like a reminder. Not all victories are loud. Some just settle. Permanent's heavy, unshakable. Marcus Carter sat motionless in seat to A, now vacant beside him. No blanket, no tote, no manufactured boundaries. Just space returned to its rightful owner. Karen remained upright, but clearly unraveling. The security officers had stepped aside. Daniel was gone. Brian, nowhere in sight. Only Mia stayed quiet, still near the galley, watching with wide eyes that no longer carried fear. But the man in the Navy suit checked his phone, then spoke quietly. Mr. Carter, the acting regional VP is joining the line now. Would you prefer to speak from here or move to the jetway? Marcus didn't even glance up. Here is fine. Let them hear where this began. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. This wasn't just happening. It was being documented, institutionalized, memorialized. Across the rows, passengers watched like they were attending a live broadcast of justice. Phones no longer recorded for viral moments. They recorded for accountability. The call came through the crew intercom. A voice, polished but strained. Mr. Carter, this is Angela Downs, acting VP of Atlantic Air, Eastern Region. I've been briefed. We're deeply sorry. Marcus didn't let her finish. You're not sorry, he said evenly. You're reacting. Angela hesitated. We were prepared to offer. This isn't about offers, Marcus continued. This is about rot. Internal, cultural, systemic. A culture where a blanket over a seat outweighs a boarding pass in a black man's hand. He paused. You'll run your press statements. You'll offer vouchers. You'll call it a misunderstanding. He turned slightly toward the phone, his voice still low, but it traveled with purpose. But you knew who I was the moment this flight was delayed. You have my account flagged, my shares logged, my influence noted. Angela's voice was faint. Yes, sir. So let's not pretend, Marcus said. The only people who didn't know were the ones trained not to look past clothing, skin tone, and silence. Karen stared, frozen. Angela exhaled through the line. We're prepared to initiate a full investigation and place the lead crew under suspension. Marcus nodded slowly. That's a start, but it's not the fix. He lifted his phone again and tapped once more, then looked up. To the cabin. I'm issuing a statement tonight, not as a CEO, not as a stakeholder, but as a passenger and a citizen. Every device in the cabin buzzed, vibrated, pinged. Notifications lit up. At Marcus Carter of Fifield, what happened to me on flight 6 to 7 wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a mirror. And now the world gets to look in. He looked toward Mia. You stood up when it counted. Mia swallowed hard. I couldn't be quiet anymore. You won't have to be, Marcus replied. You'll be contacted by our office this week. We're building something better. The man in the Navy suit nodded to her, impressed. Karen finally rose, slow, clutching her bag like it might make her invisible. She didn't speak. She didn't argue. She just left. One row, then the next. Eyes followed her like a shadow. Marcus looked forward again. C2A. Clear. Claimed. And no one was taking it again. Karen's heels clicked down the aisle like a verdict. Click, click, click. Each step not an exit or retreat. No one offered her help. No one looked away. The cabin had turned. Not just on her. On what she represented. Emma and Rofer muttered, that's not turbulence. That's accountability. Mia stood motionless near the galley. Her badge slightly crooked now, not from panic, but from standing too long without flinching. The security officers followed Karen quietly. No handcuffs, no shouts. But it felt like an arrest, just the same, not of a person, but of a pattern. Brian was already gone. He'd exited without a word the moment the suit made the call. Daniel escorted off the aircraft during Marcus's call with the VP. His epaulets looked heavier than usual, maybe because they meant nothing now. Passengers began speaking not to Marcus, but to each other. This is what it always looks like. I've seen it in hotels, in banks, in schools, but never this loud, never this clear. Row 5, the teenage girl whispered to her mom. He didn't even raise his voice. Her mother nodded. He didn't have to. He raised standards. Across the cabin, a man who hadn't said a word the entire flight raised his hand like a student. He looked toward the man in the Navy suit. Sir, will the airline be releasing a statement? The liaison nodded. Yes, and not the kind that gets buried beneath discount codes. Emma raised her phone again. Then say it on the record. Do you believe Mr. Carter was treated unfairly? A beat. The man straightened. I believe what we saw was a series of actions that reflect a broken pattern. And I believe Mr. Carter's presence exposed it not by force, but by being undeniable. Michael added, that needs to be in your statement, undeniable. Mia finally spoke, her voice steadier than it had any right to be. I've been through 4 weeks of training, she said, and not one session covered what to do when bias looks like procedure. Heads turned, not in shock and recognition. Marcus stayed seated through it all, still in 2A, unmoved, unrattled, unfolding. He looked across the aisle at no one in particular and said, this cabin's not mine. But today, it became honest. Then, quietly, he opened the folder on his lap. Inside, a compliance review packet dated 6 months ago, a strategy outline titled, Discrete Audits of First-Class Discrimination Patterns, and a list of 8 airline names. 7 had check marks. 1 Atlantic Air had a red circle. Mia saw it. Her breath caught. You were auditing us. Marcus met her gaze. No. I was giving you the opportunity to be better before someone else noticed. Her eyes widened, and now, he closed the folder. Now they know. The man in the Navy suit's phone buzzed. He glanced, then turned to Marcus. Sir, corporate just issued an emergency alert to all terminals. Any flight delay related to discrimination is now escalated directly to the executive board. They're naming it the Carter Clause. A ripple moved through the rows. Not applause. Not gasps. Just relief. That somewhere, in the middle of the sky, truth had landed. The door to the cockpit remained closed, but the cabin, wide open. Open to truths that could no longer be folded like tray tables. Open to passengers no longer just traveling but witnessing. Marcus Carter adjusted his seatbelt not because he was preparing for turbulence, but because he was about to cause it. The man in the Navy suit received a second buzz on his device. He read the screen, then looked up. "Sir, the board has authorized immediate protocol escalation. Full halt on all outbound Atlantic Air flights for the next 90 minutes. Marcus didn't nod, didn't smile, just said, "Good." Karen was long gone, but her absence still clung to the cabin like a residue, the kind you don't notice until someone airs it out. The passengers murmured, "Did he just ground the airline? For 90 minutes? Wave can do that." Marcus stood slowly, walked to the front of the cabin with the poise of a conductor reaching the podium. Before the first note, he didn't raise his voice, but he made sure every seat heard him. "I didn't ask for this flight to be canceled. I didn't want this plane grounded." He looked around calm, deliberate, but sometimes systems don't deserve altitude until they can handle equality at ground level. A beat. Then, "I've instructed the board to initiate a 30-day audit of all first-class complaints tied to disruption and sea conflicts. Every flagged incident will be reviewed by third-party civil rights counsel." He turned to Mia. "You'll be contacted by that team, not as a witness, as an advisor." Mia blinked. "Me? You did what training didn't cover," Marcus said. "You chose character over comfort." Her hands trembled as she nodded. The Navy-suited liaison took over briefly. "All current flights on delay will notify passengers of a temporary safety compliance review. Internal communications will refer to this as Carter Protocol Delta 1. Marcus returned to his seat, the one no one dared challenge now. Emma and Rofer leaned toward Michael. "Delta 1, she whispered. Michael chuckled, named after the man who made the system flinch. Someone clapped, just once. Then again. Then a wave not forced, not viral, but earned. Not because a CEO shouted, because a man refused to shrink. Marcus waited until the applause softened, then opened his laptop, not to distract, not to escape, to document. Because the final act of justice isn't reaction, it's record. The captain's voice finally came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot, due to a situation requiring immediate review. This flight will remain grounded at Gate B14. We apologize for the delay and thank you for your patience." Then after a pause no one expected, "And thank you, Mr. Carter." The intercom clicked off. Passengers smiled, shook their heads in disbelief, not at the delay, but at the shift. This wasn't just a moment, it was a standard. Gate B14 was quiet now, not silent but reverent, like the final notes of a symphony still hanging in the air, daring anyone to speak before the last echo lands. The passengers had begun disembarking, slowly, gently. No rush, no chaos, only awareness. Some shook Marcus's hand as they passed. Others gave nods, soft words. A silent look of thanks, the kind that travels deeper than applause. Emma from Rofer paused at his row. "Thank you," she said, eyes glassy but firm. "You didn't just stay in your seat. You held it for all of us." Marcus replied simply, "I wasn't alone." Mia followed shortly behind, her navy blazer now slightly wrinkled, her trainee badge no longer shining but glowing nonetheless. "They offered me early certification," she said, shyly. "Said I handled myself beyond expectations." "You didn't follow a script," Marcus replied. "You followed truth." She smiled. "Will you really call me?" He handed her a small black card. No logo, no title, just a name. Marcus Carter. And a number. "When systems don't know what to do with people like us," he said, "we don't knock louder. We build new doors." She held the card like a compass. Marcus stood then, slowly, deliberately. He picked up his carry-on, the one once pulled out without permission, and zipped it with finality. He didn't look back. As he stepped onto the jetway, the cabin crew whispered behind him, "That's the guy who grounded the airline." "No, that's the guy who raised it." Outside, the tarmac was still, sky overcast, but steady. A corporate car waited near the terminal. Rachel, crisp suit, tablet in hand, opened the rear door herself. "They're calling it a watershed moment," she said, eyes scanning the latest feeds. Over 2 million views in 90 minutes. Hashtags trending globally. Marcus stepped in. Did you send the full footage? Rachel nodded. Every angle. We're not editing a frame. Good. She glanced up. Anything you want to say before it hits national media? He looked out the window. The plane behind them, motionless. The airline below them, humbled. Then he spoke softly, like a verdict. They said I didn't belong in that seat. Funny thing is, it was never the seat that proved I belonged. It was their reaction to my silence. He turned from the window, face forward. Let them fly differently now. And with that, the door closed. The car pulled away, and the system for once followed.